Before we begin, thank you very much to Matt R. for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the support. Do appreciate it. Thank you everyone who does so. I am not hyperbolizing when I say you are the only reason I can continue to do this. So if anyone feels generous and wants to pitch in a couple bucks a month to make sure all this free content keeps coming, then the link is in the description below, and I appreciate it a great deal. It gets you Discord access, even at the low levels. So you can join the community if you would like to. But thank you very much for doing so. All right, here's 10 time, and once again, it is time for the best toys of a particular year, and this time it is 2007, which is kind of an important year in the franchise. So yeah, this is the debut of the live-action films and the enormous demand for Transformers that came after the first movie debuted, which means we have a ton of toys to talk about. But it's not just the live-action movie line that was going on. Alternators and Classics was finishing up this year. Titanium and Star Wars Transformers were finally finding their footing and starting to produce some pretty good toys. And then you had some weird outliers from Japan, like the Label series debuting. Also, Masterpiece Starscream managed to come to the US in decent colors with less fragile plastic. So yeah, kind of a banger year, and you would hope for that with how momentous the occasion was. But we are here to talk about the top 10 toys that came out, so with no further ado, here are the top 10 Transformers of the year 2007, and we're going to start in a very unusual place, but it's a toy I always defend because I think out of the entire line, this is the one toy worth defending. You might think I have injured myself if by naming a titanium toy to this list, but I still really like the RID Optimus Prime they produced. Not going to put it any higher than 10, but I will give it its credit for being a pretty inventive Transformer at the time. These days we have this somewhat common thing of toys that kind of flip themselves inside out in order to transform, and this toy kind of did it first. And the result of which is a really well designed and frankly fine-tuned take on RID Optimus Prime, going from the fire truck straight to the super robot mode and still producing a decently articulated and nice looking incarnation of the character. And it even includes a few gimmicks. The flip-out guns from the ladder are still included. He has forearm guns that can raise out of from hidden panels. That's not something that Titanium typically did. It's a little step in the right direction for them. So yeah, it's not the most feature-loaded figure. However, I do think it's one of the times that Titanium's team absolutely got it right. This is just a fun take on RID Optimus Prime, and it makes for a really good desktop-sized version of the character, and I would call it the best Titanium ever did. If they had started out with this quality, man, who knows how good those figures would have turned out. Maybe the line wouldn't have gotten cut before all those nice G1 toys came down. Ah well, at least we got RID Prime out of it. We've talked about the 07 toy line a lot on this channel, so it shouldn't be any surprise that we're going to talk about a few of the figures I've already mentioned in videos past. So, if you've paid enough attention to the channel, you can probably guess as to what my favorite figures are going to be and which ones are actually going to end up on this list. For instance, Bone Crusher should not come as a surprise to anybody. First off, I do like the uniqueness, like the Minesweeper truck is a pretty cool design. It's the Buffalo, I believe it is called. But I love the Minesweeper arm. I love that it gives it a play factor in vehicle mode you typically do not get with a Transformer. I also like that it manages to stay somewhat accurate to how the actual character looks. He's a big, tough, big-armed, kind of squat, kind of character with this interesting body shape to him that was kind of atypical with a Transformer. And yeah, I even like the little extendy arm gimmick. I think that's kind of fun. More to the point, I've always just loved the look and design of this one. Even though my tastes in the live-action movies aesthetic has kind of waned over the years, I still really like how Bone Crusher looks, and it's one of those depictions I really wish we would see in more Generation style that would come back for a cartoon or something, because I love just this giant-armed, short-legged, angry guy. I like him. I think he works. And then we're going to get repaints of this guy like that I think bring him out even better. Give him a lot more distinction. But the desert camo look still works for me. Still really like still really like it. And yeah, one of the better figures from the line. Yeah, I've always been a fan of this one. Here's one I discussed very recently, and I was very glowing in my review of this toy because, well, frankly, he was always my favorite one to play with at the time. Now, since then, I've kind of, readjusted, but I will still hold a fond place for that Voyager Ratchet figure. For starters, I liked it because it just felt big, chunk, solid toy. He didn't suffer from the flat panel and spindliness on some of his parts like Jazz did. He didn't have way too many parts to rearrange like the Bumblebees tended to have. He's just a big, solid, blocky truck, of a figure, and it works. He works and looks really great as a result. It's a fun one to transform. It just feels like a nice Transformer experience. And I like weird things that he has going on, like the fact that the underside of the vehicle mode is the top of his chest. That was really different. It's familiar, but it lets you produce a bit of a unique aesthetic. Combine that with things like the bars at the top becoming a capture claw and the flip out axe, and you've got enough play features to keep me interested as well. And his automorph trick really didn't get in the way, nor was it in any danger of being broken if you went a little bit too quick with the transformation. All in all, really, really solid figure. If you weren't a fan of how the movie designs got overcomplicated, you still wanted something that was more block chunk solid like Classics was, Ratchet was for you. I often say that some of my favorite stuff out of the movie lines are the things that weren't actually in the movie because it lets the designers just kind of play and do a lot of different things than they were forced to do for the sake of screen accuracy. And that is true of Wreckage. I have talked glowingly about this one, and it is still a very, very cool one. Again, it's a vehicle mode that really isn't claimed by any one Transformer. Again, Wreckage is another one where I would love to see him down the line. Is just that's the APC Transformer. That's just the one we go to anytime we want that vehicle in the lineup. Beyond that, Arctic camo, it was a nice way of offsetting all the other military vehicles that filled the Decepticons for this toy line. The double-bladed, weapon, it's very Darth Maul, which is always going to be cool. I will even give notice to the translucent elements in this toy because they are kept to a minimum. They are mostly just kept to his guns, which gives them this cool, red Energon glowy look. Overall, really, really solid, and again, just really well put together and designed figure. Not overly complicated, not over involved. It's just a nice, solid Transformer that's fun to play with, and that's really all I ask. Oh yeah, and then putting the blades on his wheel, pegging them into the wheel and spinning. That also cool too. I like that one too. Yeah, overall, really, really solid toy. I don't care if he wasn't in the movie. I would love to see Studio Series put him in a Voyager price point. I would love to see this one come back. This was the final proper year for alternators, which was a little bit sad because they had so much potential and it was designed for collectors, so it felt special. They just fell into their own traps, and this one died out while still having a few left to kind of just sneak in as store exclusives. Doesn't mean the last wave wasn't interesting though. Case in point, Ravage. This was such a unique figure. Keep in mind, at the time, the closest you got to a vehicle to animal transformer were Soundwave's cassettes. This was not a typical thing. To produce a full-size transformer that completely omits a robot mode. We had mutants, but that was by accident because they were supposed to be Animorph toys. This was intentional. So this was kind of first of its kind. A Transformer car that turns into a beast. And such a brilliant choice, It's a Jaguar that transforms into Ravage. A Jaguar. That's so perfect. You know, like it's the joke that you never thought they would actually be able to pull off, especially because Jaguar was one of those like very elitist car brands that really didn't want their stuff to be a Transformer, but they finally caved. We got a really interesting and fun and different figure out of it. This Ravage produces such a different experience than most other Transformers you could name. Even to this date, it stands as one of the most unique. You know, I would have loved to have seen what else they could have done. You imagine if they could have done a laser beak if they continued, because Rumble was in this wave too. You know, and if they had like gone full on and did a laser beak, like a car that transformed into a Condor, oh, the potential, the fun this could have been. Then Soundwave would have had to have been a full car carrier. Point being, it was a really, really interesting toy for alternators to go out on. Kind of put across a really strong hand that maybe showed maybe this should have continued just a little bit longer, because obviously they were cooking, and it's unfortunate. The restaurant closed down too soon. I have mixed feelings about the automorphing. It was the whole core of the toys in 07, because sometimes it was handled poorly, sometimes it took away from like the tactile Transformer experience, but there were times where it was done in a really neat way, and the toy still offered a lot of fun besides that. Let's talk about Ironhide. Now, for starters, he is just a really cool look. In fact, I think I like this form and shape for Ironhide more than I do the movie-accurate incarnations in Masterpiece and in Studio Series we have gotten since. I still think I kind of prefer this one. You know, I love the big weapon accessories with all the firing missiles. That was a lot of fun to have. I love the fact they combine and it still functions as a big launcher while they are combined. I really like the automorph that goes on with this figure. So there's a weird like spring to his automorph in the chest. That's a little bit odd, but I always remember really liking what the legs did. When you fold the feet down and all the panels of legs shift around to become more movie accurate, that was actually a really cool trick. You know, it wasn't invasive of any of the other parts. You weren't at risk of breaking your toy doing it the wrong way. It was just a really neat thing to see it do. You know, and then top that off on just an interesting transformation, a fun looking robot mode, and yeah, like these gigantic weapons. You know, these kind of big arm weapons were reserved for Megatron, but you know, you put them on Ironhide and it just kind of makes sense. Yeah, fantastic figure. Will only get better with time as they remold it into even cooler forms, but for 07, very, very good release. Here's the left field entry from the release, because this one took everyone by surprise. So in Japan, Takara decided to start producing what they called label Transformers, where they're more looked upon like designer items and like a different echelon than just your standard everyday store-bought Transformer. You know, whether that was in the characters they licensed, the forms they took, or the technology they employed. There was this Soundwave. I will still argue, at the deluxe size, this is the best Soundwave toy we ever got, because the articulation and the look of it is just fantastic. It's an incredibly smooth looking, take on the character. On top of the fact, when it transforms, it again just looks really, really nice and smooth. It is an exceptionally clean take on Soundwave. No extraneous parts, no real kibble. It's just really, really good. You top that off with the fact that he does come with his traditional weapons, which is cool. He comes with swappable hands, which was not a thing in Transformers. You didn't get that back then. That was just completely out of nowhere. That's when you knew Takara was taking this seriously. But that is not the main point of the piece. The main point of the piece is that there is an actual SD card slot in his tape deck. He doesn't have cassettes. He has a spot where you can actually put an SD card and you can use him as an actual MP3 player. Admittedly, he is a very primitive one. I don't think the memory card can be anything over 2 or 4 gig, and you have to plug in your own headphones or speakers in order to make him play. There's obviously no screen. All you can do is scroll through your tracks in alphabetical order, and then you have pause button, you have next track, previous track, etc. basic function. But the fact that they worked it in and that it transforms and it still functions as a fully fledged transformer on top of all that, epic. Absolutely incredible. Oh, and then they did Rumble and Frenzy headphones to go with them, and those transform too, which is, again, just... This was a different level indeed. This was just an extremely cool release. Even to this day, this is a hard Soundwave to top. If it could play its own, if it could add speakers of its own, and you could just make Soundwave play whatever you want, this would have been like an all-timer. But as it is, absolutely one of the best of the year. I will admit to some weaknesses in Transformers, and one of them is just really big vehicles that just feel nice and solid to mess around with and transform. So when you give me a gigantic tank in Brawl, I'm going to be all over it. Now, I've stated in the past I kind of like the deluxe version better, but only when it gets to its repaint, when the engineering is a lot more solid. That said, this is still a really fantastic version of the character. Gigantic, very solid, very chunk transformation that I like. It's got like the auto head raising thing that the leader class toys had that year. You've got light up gimmicks as well. You've got audio. You've got so much going on with the figure. On top of just hidden guns, hidden blades, hidden everything. Like, they went all out. It's kind of like a marketing strategy behind the toy where they tried to go all out with it because it's not a major name and he doesn't have a whole lot of screen time in the movie, but it's a big, gigantic vehicle, so a leader class toy makes sense. So yeah, no big surprise that they ended up doing him at this size, and it's a fantastic figure on top of all of that. Yeah, just big, satisfying figure to play with. You know, whether you're playing with the electronic accessories or not, lots on the figure to do. Yeah, absolutely one of the best. And then when they start repainting it, only got better. I told you Star Wars Transformers found its footing in 2007. Unfortunately, I think it lost its footing shortly after, but not before giving us something of a Transformer and Star Wars fans' dream, something that I don't think we ever assumed would be possible, and yet here it was in all of its glory. Darth Vader as the Death Star. It's such a weird toy to exist, but I am happy that it does. We're going to address the elephant in the room here, yes. He does have a lot of kibble going on, but he does not have the advantages that Unicron and Primus had, in that they could kind of work with their robot forms to work the planet mode in a lot more. Here you've got to have Darth Vader, who is a predominantly black-colored character, transforming into a gigantic off-white sphere. So you're going to have some weirdness to it. And that said, I still think they got it across really, really well, and it still functions really, really well. You top that off with a lot of things. For instance, the feet, so it can be a perfect ball in vehicle mode and still stand upright. That's a great knowledge. That's a great little spot to put in. And then the laser for the Death Star is actually his handheld laser, and there's both missile firing in both modes. That's great. I love the TIE fighters that it comes with that you can mount around the surface. Maybe a little out of proportion, but still really cool to throw in. And the fact he's got storage for a lot of this stuff in all of his various parts as well. It's just such an insane figure to exist. You just did not anticipate this was ever going to be a thing. Yeah, it's not as clean, but we know with HasLab Unicron, even today, Hasbro kind of struggles figuring out how to get a sphere to turn into a humanoid form like this. So the fact that they actually worked a Darth Vader in back then, and it looks like Vader, and it plays well, like you want a Vader toy to do, I think they did about as good as you possibly could. Coming up to number 1 on this list should be no surprise because we have not mentioned the character at all, and it's a shame because he's had several good toys in 2007, but only one that can reign as my absolute favorite. If we're talking my favorite toy of 2007, we have to look at the leader Optimus Prime. So, once upon a time, I did the top 10 toys of the decade. It was one of the first major videos I did. And on that list is the Revenge of the Fallen version of this toy. And that is still a very marvelous piece of engineering. But when it just comes to fun to mess with, I still go back to this toy. Because, yes, the Revenge of the Fallen one is a lot more screen accurate, but it's so involved, and it takes so long to transform that it's almost a chore. Whereas this one, yes, you've got a bunch of kibble on his back, on the back of his legs, whatever, but it's this big, solid chunk transformer that's just fun to mess with, and it's a lot more intuitive going in and out of robot and vehicle mode. It's a lot of fun. And then you put in all the different gimmicks. He has the rising head and the lines from Peter Cullen, the lights on him as well. You've got the flip out arm cannon with the firing missile. That's all great. And then you wrap it up in this really nicely presented and really well done version of the vehicle mode from the movie. The fact that they threw a toy like this together in a year and put it out and it's this good, I think, is a testament to how good the Hasbro designers were back then. I recently got reacquainted with this toy thanks to buying the Night Watch version, and yeah, it's still just fun to mess with. Yeah, it's solid, it's satisfying, it's full of play features, it still looks great in my opinion. Yeah, absolutely my toy of 2007. But that is my list, and that is a very opinionated list, so you are free to disagree with it in the comments below, so long as you're being civil about it, of course. But that's what I have for you today. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.